In this lesson, I'd like to point out 3 steps we can keep in mind when blocking in animations. So here they are. I find that these 3 steps help tremendously when not only trying to figure out ideas to animate, but then to see those ideas through. A lot of times we may run into an animator's block where we're really struggling to figure out what to animate. And I find that these 3 steps help us to keep focused and come up with inspirational ideas. So the first point is, what is the story point? Now, if you're struggling to figure out an idea, it might help to step back, step away, and maybe read a comic that you are very fond of, or probably watch one of your favorite movies. Not to say that you'll get the idea from that, but what I'm basically getting at is sometimes we want to kind of relax our thoughts so that we can come up with fresh ideas. But sometimes it does take just stepping away from the computer or whatever media we're using to animate, so that when we get back, we can come up with something that's going to be very enjoyable to work on. All right, so again, we want to think about our story point. Once we have that in mind, then we can start to break down that first step into sub-steps and get an idea of the type of character that we are animating. What's the character's personality? What's the character's height, the weight, the past history of the character? Because all of that will determine how this character is going to perform throughout the entire sequence. So we know that our wolf character here is on guard. Well, is the guard on high alert, or is it more of an uneventful day? And if the guard is to be on high alert, does the guard even care? So you get where I'm going with that. We want to really figure out the personality and connect with the character, because if we can connect with our character, then the audience can as well. Now next, we need to think about the character's mannerisms. Is it truer to its beastly nature, or is it more of a humanoid? And if so, if it is truer to its beastly nature, is there some way we can add a personality to this character for empathy so an audience can relate with it? Then that brings us to our next step, which is acquiring reference. So this can be in the form of video footage, or perhaps inspirational art that we can use to get gestural ideas from. Then we could start to piece together our video footage, or bring together all of these images, maybe remove some that don't quite match the character's mood and mannerisms, and definitely keep the ones that will really make the story strong. Then we can come up with thumbnails at that point. I actually have a set to show you. So you can see this first image here is actually a presentation of not just one thumbnail, but several ideas. So that brings up a good point. We want to come up with more than just one idea so that we can choose what's going to work best for our character. So you can see in image A, we have more of a tough yet relaxed stance. Very fun pose. In image B, you can see that the character is more of a savage type and on high alert, so its timing would probably be very snappy. Image C, we could see the character is more focused and upright. I really enjoyed A here. It was just a very fun pose. And so once we have figured out where we'd like to start from, then we know how to create the other thumbnail. So I'll go ahead and move to the next image. And here you could see that the character kind of gets distracted. So we have a few choices here. We could either have the character scratch his head, or look at his hand, perhaps something stuck in his nail, perhaps something on his hand is irritating him. I chose B here because A, sometimes it gets cliche. So we do want to always find ways to be original, get more creative, and not do something that we see often in animation. All right, so that brings us to our next image. This is where the wolf is finally struck. So A, I kind of like that because it was very dynamic. B, I really enjoyed this one because of the exaggerated arch in the back, and I think it really sells the force that the creature's getting struck with. And that brings us to our last thumbnail, which is the wolf lying down after being struck. A, again, feels a little bit cliche, but B, I really enjoyed it because of the poetic nature of this thumbnail. this tough creature here now lying in a very tranquil way. So these are the deciding factors behind each of the poses that we'll work on in this course. There are more poses. We don't necessarily have to thumbnail the entire sequence, just the ones that we really need to set in our minds as the key points that need to be brought out. All right, so then that brings us to our last step, which is to solidify our start and end pose. This is very important when we're working with a shot camera. We need to make sure that our character will always remain framed properly. So if we figure out our start and end, this will help us make sure that all poses we add in between will always stay set to the camera framing that has been decided. There's nothing worse than blocking in your animation only to realize that the character may need to be pulled back a bit just so that it can stay in frame. So if we figure out our start and end, again, we can pose everything that happens in the center more confidently, knowing that everything will be framed correctly. All right, so let's go ahead and keep all of these ideas in mind. And in the next lesson, we will start to set up our scene so we can get right in and start to animate.